Funding for this program is provided by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of the complete line of Cajun King seafood seasoning mixes and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Louisiana. Hello, I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. We're real proud of our people, places, and food, and I'd like for you to know a little bit more about it. So join me and some of my friends as we visit the historical food towns of this state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana. Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Taste of Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, and I really appreciate you visiting the kitchen today as we continue to search out those historical food towns of Louisiana. Today, we're going over to the western part of our state, kind of in the center, to the parish of Bora, and to the towns of DeRidder, Leesville, and Maryville, Louisiana. What wonderful little bitty country towns. We're looking at the main street of DeRidder, Louisiana. This is right down the center of the town. This town was originally called Scoville and then DeKidder, but eventually DeRidder. This is the Big D Corral. It's one of the main Western stores in that town. I did say this was West Louisiana, and this is the standard mercantile. Imagine a store this size at the turn of the century in a little bitty Louisiana town. This was the first USO building anywhere in the United States. It's celebrating its 50th year, as you can see. Right here in the post office is a mural that was painted during the WPA and CCC days, right prior to World War II. A lot of these murals were painted all over the United States, but in many famous buildings like this post office right here in DeRidder, Louisiana. The Beauregard Museum. This was originally a train station, and this train station was converted to a museum just a few years ago, and a lot of the artifacts from that area, from that part of the state, are on exhibit right here daily for everyone to see. Of course, you can see all these great pieces of clothing. This girl was a wax. She was serving in the wax right here from that area, and look at that gorgeous old lace wedding dress. Imagine that, walking down the aisle many years ago in that lace. What a beautiful old depot. This is my good buddy, Butch Perkins. Butch is in the opal business. Imagine mining opals in Louisiana. You normally think of going to Australia for that, but Louisiana does have opal mines. And this is in Leesville, right outside of DeRidder. And I tell you, when you look for good opals, you kind of look for the fire. That's the color in it. And if you look at this stone right here, you can see some of that fire as Butch kind of turns it a little bit. This kind of gives opals their value or their importance in the gem world. Talking about gems, this is a bog right outside of Leesville, right outside of DeRidder, and there's a lot of natural grass. This is grass flowers. People come out all the time just to view this natural habitat. This is the pitcher plant. You can tell why just by looking at it. It fills up with rainwater during the rain, and insects will come by to sip a little drink right out of that pitcher plant. There's actually a bird and bog festival that takes place in this part of the country Memorial Day weekend, and you might want to come out to look at that little sundial plant or some of the natural orchids that grow in and around that bog area. What a wonderful part of the state. You know, I'm sure even in your own area, all of these little bitty towns are trying to do a lot to preserve their past, and it's certainly true here in Louisiana. When I travel around the state, I'm amazed at what's happening in these towns to not only preserve their heritage, but to show it and put it on exhibit for visitors coming through. And that's why I want you to come and visit our state and visit towns like Merryville, DeRidder, and Leesville. And talking about Merryville, it's about 3, 4, 5 miles or so down the road out of DeRidder. And my guest today is John Winn. And John is a guy who knows a lot about history from that area of the state. He actually had a lot to do with starting a museum himself down in that area. And he's going to come and visit with us and share a lot of the great things that's happening in Maryville down the road from DeRidder. He'll be here in just a little bit. Well, what are we going to cook today? Well, I tell you, there's a lot of Spanish influence in that area of the state. A lot of Spanish, because that's right by the Sabine River, right next to the Texas border. And because of that, naturally, we're going to see a lot of things that have to do with tomato and, of course, lasagna. That's why we're going to get some good lasagna in the state of Louisiana. And to make a good lasagna, which is what I want to share with you now, we have to begin with a great tomato sauce. And I think that's the secret to any good lasagna, pasta, spaghetti dish is a good tomato sauce, naturally. So let me crank up my old black iron pot here, get that fire nice and hot. And what do we begin with? Well, hey, good olive oil to begin. And look at my good olive oil bottle. This is an old 100-year-old olive oil bottle that you see me use every now and then. And I'm going to put a little bit of that virgin olive oil down into the pot and get it going. There's a lot of good olive oils on the market, but of course, use whatever oil you would like. I think olive oil has a really nice flavor when you're making tomato sauces. Into that, of course, you're going to want to put some nice, fresh chopped tomatoes. And I like to saute my tomatoes at the same time I put in my onions and celery and bell pepper. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put the tomatoes right down into the olive oil, and then all of those great Louisiana flavors. Look at here. A little bit onion. Got to have that. How can you make a good tomato sauce without celery? And, of course, bell pepper. Now, of course, I would like to put red, green, yellow, all of the different color bell peppers because, naturally, I like that good color in the pot. There's a little red and then green. Look how pretty that is already. One thing about spaghetti sauces or any kind of cooking in Spanish technique, you're going to have a lot of colors because it's, again, that subtropical climate like we have here in Louisiana, so there's a lot of color in the cooking. And spaghetti without garlic, come on, give me a break. You have to have a little garlic in there. Nice little spoon, maybe 2 little spoons of garlic and a nice lasagna. And once this all sautés with the tomato and the onions, then I would add my tomato paste. And, of course, you can use your own flavorings here, but I'm going to use a good rich tomato paste, and then to thin it out, tomato sauce. And I'm going to put a couple 8-ounce cans or so, depending on the volume of lasagna you want to make, some fresh mushrooms, and then some oregano, a little touch of oregano, and I have to have some basil leaves broken down into the pot as well. And then I'll stir all of this around. Just think of how great the flavor of this tomato sauce is going to be with all of those wonderful flavors. Of course, the mushrooms will pick up all the flavors, and they'll taste great themselves. The garlic will add its own wonderful taste, and then the basil and oregano will certainly flavor the sauce. I always like to add some cracked black pepper for spice, and then 1 bay leaf and a little sugar, because sugar will take the bitterness out of the tomato sauce, and then I can always add a couple touches of Louisiana hot sauce. And I would allow this to cook for about an hour or so. Now, I know Italians who tell me that you have to cook tomato sauce a minimum of 6 to 8 hours, and I know others that say they put their spaghetti sauce on or their lasagna sauce on when they boil the noodles. So I don't know who's right, but I tell you, I would let mine cook for about an hour or so for all the flavors to develop, and I'll cut the fire down to just let it simmer nicely while I put the lasagna together. Now, I want you to take a look at all of these great things that's going to go into my lasagna. I'm going to do a shrimp and broccoli lasagna. So I've got some nice steamed broccoli. I've got some shrimp that's already been boiled and all of the excess water squeezed out, and I think that's very important because you don't want all that liquid in the lasagna. And then I'm going to put some more mushrooms and fresh oregano and basil as I layer it. Of course, you have to have cheese. And here I have a little ricotta cheese that has 1 egg broken into it. And this is where that great cheese flavor is going to come from. So I'm going to spread a little bit of that ricotta right down on the noodles. And my really good wooden spoon here will help spread that around. You want to get a nice even layer of the ricotta cheese. And then I also like to add a little Parmesan to it, like this, and then a little mozzarella. There's a lot of things that go down into a good lasagna, obviously, and then some of the vegetables, like that. Got to put a lot of this good broccoli. And think how pretty this is going to be with the green broccoli and shrimp. And then, of course, let me put some of this sauce. Let's assume that this sauce has been cooking for about an hour or so. And I'm going to get a nice ladle of it and put right down in there like this. And boy, I tell you, you can see how this is going. And you see how nice and thick that sauce is. And I think that's another very important thing about lasagna is that you're going to want to have a nice thick sauce. Get that layer right there going into the pan and then come through with another layer. And you can do this as many times as you have height in the pan or as much pasta as you would like to put, depending on what your family enjoys. And then again, the same thing, another layer of the ricotta. And please use some of your imagination and flavors in here. If you like to break fresh basil or a little oregano or some rosemary down into the ricotta cheese, do it. You can even put some nice smoked meats like sausages or anything else. I'll build your own lasagna pizza here. I'm going to put some shrimp now right down on top of that. Now remember, we have a layer of the broccoli. We have a layer of the shrimp. I'm going to put a little bit mushrooms here. And then I'm going to put some fresh basil, a little bit more of the Parmesan dusted right into it like this. Imagine how rich this is going to be. Some more of the mozzarella. And then the rest of the tomato. And I would continue doing this, layering it all the way up and then finishing it with a nice big old handful of mozzarella, maybe a little touch of paprika for color. And then I would bake it in an oven at about 350 degrees for about 20-25 minutes for all of the great flavors to cook together, because everything's really already cooked. So you don't have to worry about leaving it in there for 2 hours. Just brown that cheese nicely on the top, get a good rich tomato flavor developing with the shrimp and the broccoli. And I've already got one cooked, so I got to get all this mess out of the way for you here. And I want to get one out of the oven for you so you can look at what that beautiful lasagna. Oh, look at this thing. Whew. Imagine this. Shrimp and broccoli. Take a good look at that while I close this door. And then, of course, I would garnish it with a little nice purple cabbage, and I could put some yellow bell peppers right on top of it, a little carrot, diced carrot again, and you could put a nice, beautiful sprig of basil right up in the corner of it, and it makes a wonderful presentation. Serve it right in the dish. Go ahead and quarter a nice big chunk out of the corner, and you've got a wonderful, wonderful dish. Lasagna using shrimp and broccoli right there. Okay, the next dish that I want to do for you is something else that comes from right out of that area, Louisiana, and we're always looking for some type of specialty vegetable. We get so sick and tired of the same vegetables time and time again. And what I like to do is try to come up with some things that not only taste good but look good, but are a little bit different. And think about string beans for a minute. You probably said you'd never cook string beans again as long as you lived properly. Look at this. Here I've taken some nice, fresh string beans, so you can snap the ends off just by breaking the ends off or cut them. And then I've taken them and poached them in chicken stock. Now, you poach them in chicken stock, you're already adding great flavor to the string beans. So poach them, but then once they come out of the boiling water after a couple of minutes, you shock them, as we say, in ice water. And what will happen, it'll set the color in the string beans and at the same time keep them nice and crisp so they're not falling apart. Once that's done, I like to take them and put about 6 of them in a little bundle, and I've taken some fresh chives, and you can see these chives I've snipped right out of the garden, and I've poached them in some nice hot water, and this is what they look like when they've been poached. And I can take the little bundle of string beans. This is actually called string bean bundles, obviously. Now, there's a reason for that, right? Go ahead and tie them like this, and you can tie a knot, or you can get creative and put a little bow if you want to, and what you have is a nice little bundle, as I've done here. I've got a couple of them already done. And what I'm going to do now is to bread them and deep fry them or pan fry them. You can saute them if you would like. And this is almost like a tempura green bean. So what I have is a little bit just regular flour. Now, the important thing, if you're going to add flavor to those green beans, is to season this with some nice, unique flavor. So I'm going to put a little salt, pepper, thyme, and basil right down into the flour. I want to get that really nice and mixed up. Then I'm going to put some of this Parmesan cheese down into the flour to put cheese flavor down into the middle of the little bitty green beans. And let me turn this fire up here on my black iron pot so I can get that oil going. And you want to get your oil up to about 375 degrees. You want to fry it nice and crispy, and oil must be at about 375 for frying. So once that's seasoned up nicely, then I would take a little bit egg wash. Now this is a couple scrambled eggs, and I'm going to add a little cream. Of course, again, you can use yogurt, you can use skim milk if you would like. You can put a little beer into this batter if you want to, and stir that around, and then take the little bundles of string beans like this, dip it down into the egg wash, and then into the cheese-coated seasoned flour. And imagine all of that egg getting down into the little string bean bundles, as we call it, and then we would dust them. You can work them pretty good because the ties will certainly hold them together. And you want to put them down into a 375-degree oil and let them fry for just a couple of minutes. Now, I'm not sure this oil is going to be hot enough here, and it won't be, but I'll let this sit here for just a second, and it'll be almost like tempura. I've got a batch of them that's already done that I want to share with you so you can see what they look like. And let me move this out of the way. And take a look at this. As they come out of that real hot oil, you can see what the tempura beans will look like. Look how nice and crispy they are. All that great cheese flavor with the pepper and the salt and the spices in the center, and serve 2 or 3 of them as a nice vegetable. So that's what they look like, and that is your fried green bean bundles. Now, what would I serve with this? Well, look at this blueberry pound cake. This blueberry pound cake is cut right in the center, and we put a little sweetened cream cheese down in the middle and powdered sugar with the blueberries, and I've made a little blueberry syrup. Take a look at this, right on top of the pound cake. Fantastic. Cut a couple slices out of that and serve it with ice cream. It's magnificent. Okay, now I told you about my good buddy who was coming to visit with me from Maryville, Louisiana, John Winn. And hey, John, come on in.
Hey,
We were just talking
John.
about you. How you doing?
What's going on?
Hey, man, nothing too much. Good to have you. What do you have there?
Well, let me put this cap down. I'll tell you about it, John.
Man, I tell you, don't leave that cap. You leave that cap every time you come here. I must have about
know.
100 of them.
That's the last one I got. You got the rest of them. John, this is a bayonet off from an 1812 flintlock.
Right.
It's the oldest piece we have in the museum. Now, those people that had these things, these guns during the wars, they used them as a knife, like you do your carving knife.
Right.
They cut up the meat, the onions, and herbs. Sometimes they'd stick somebody with it.
Well, I tell you, this is an interesting 1812, huh?
War of 1812 in that area.
Well, I know good and well that these knives were real sharp back then, and it was the main cutting tool for the, you know, you talk about Maryville Museum. What a wonderful, wonderful little museum you have there. And when I was there last, we were lucky enough to get a couple shots of the inside of that thing, and I want to share it with our viewers exactly what it looks like. Why don't you tell us what we're looking at right here?
Good, John.
Okay.
Okay, this is the Burke's cabin. It was restored in 1986. We're proud of that, and we have some original artifacts in there. This is the museum itself. It was built in 1988, and most of the material in there is from the turn of the century. There are some material later. We have a pre-Civil War rope bed in there. We're real precious to us. We are air conditioning. This is a 1935 Sears and Roebuck wagon. And this is a P-row. It's built, dug out before the turn of the century. We're real proud of that. Some old Victrolas. One of them still plays, and they're fun to fool with, but we don't do it anymore.
Well, look how nice this old needle ready to go, huh?
That's World War II material and some World War I.
Well, there's a big fort. There's Fort Polk, Louisiana, right around the corner. So there's a lot of artifacts.
That's the old leggings, you know. Before.
Right, sure. Look at that refrigerator.
Okay, now this is an interesting thing. That's a 1936 GE refrigerator. It still works, and we use it in the museum now.
All right.
And we're proud of it. This is some of the older shots of people in and around Maryville.
And that's right in the museum hanging on the wall there, right?
Right. This is in downtown Maryville. Okay, this is interesting. This is Woodman of the World. In 1912, they had the Gray Bowl riot there, and leather breeches inside the riot with the labor people took him over there. He was later killed right out of Maryville, and he's buried right there.
He's a very famous, somebody said he was a cowboy, but leather breeches was actually just someone who was involved with the labor movement in the forestry industry up there.
That's right. He was run out of Texas, was they say for murder, and he was tried for murder here, but they couldn't catch him.
Now, you know, we talk about Woodman of the World. We were just looking at that, at those pictures. Right in that area was probably one of the largest logging industries right near Merryville and DeRidder. And that's where probably one of the unions first started up. Woodman of the World was actually a union to try to organize the labor there. And old Leather Breeches came in to help him out with one of their spites or one of their fusses, and he got in a little trouble there.
That's right.
So he's buried right on the hill, somebody was telling me. Very famous character in Louisiana history. John, I understand that you and I have a lot in common when it comes to the restaurant business. Your father was in the restaurant business in that area.
Yes, John, he was. And the further Nactus meat pies, he was the first one to commercialize them. And they sold for a nickel a piece in those days. That was in the late 20s and early 30s. Now,
the restaurant, you were telling me a story that a lot of people would come there and they didn't have a dime, so he would feed them, and checks keep coming in the mail many years later, right?
That's right. During the Great Depression we had, college kids, if they didn't have money to eat with, they could come to Papa, and so would guys out of work. And from the later years, for a number of years after he died, we still got checks from doctors, lawyers, farmers, what have you.
John, when I was visiting with you last, I got a great recipe from your wife, Ruth, for stuffed artichoke bottoms. And I want to talk a lot about Maryville. I want to talk about the museum because it's so interesting there. But I have to show these people this great recipe. Why don't you take that black iron skillet, fire it up for me, put a little butter in it, and I want to show all of you what we're going to put into this skillet. Just put me a little butter in there, John. That'd be great. Into this skillet, I'm going to do a little crab meat stuffed artichoke bottoms. And I have white crab meat. I have a little claw crab meat right here. And then, of course, artichoke bottoms, which you can get in a can, or you can take the time to clean them yourself if you would like, but it takes a lot of time. So just get them in a can and rinse them off. And John's wife, Ruth, said, hey, they're just as good, so I'm going to believe her. Now, into this black iron skillet, we're going to put a little bit, as John stirs it around, we're going to put a little bit onions. I'm going to put a little touch of celery down into it. Again, all of the typical flavors. That's what she told me to do.
That's right.
So you, does she feed you these a lot?
Yeah, and you do what she tells you to do.
That's the way you have to live there, huh? Okay, a little bit garlic. Now you stir all of that around real nicely into that skillet, and then I'm going to add some of this great crab meat right down into the pan, and it'll pick up all of that wonderful flavor there of the onions and the garlic. And as you're stirring that, I'll add a few little pieces of red bell pepper, and just saute that around and let it cook for just a second. Now, let's talk about Maryville for a minute. The museum there, I know was a dream of the Historical Society back in 1976. How did all that happen?
Well, a bunch of ladies got together, and a couple of men, and they decided that's what they wanted to do. So they organized with the one thing in mind, build a museum. It took them to 1988 to get one finished. And it's great. We got everything that you can imagine in the thing.
Well, what's some of the more interesting pieces that y'all actually have there?
Well, I can refer to you that rope bed, 1812 rifle. We've got old pianos, old wagons. We've got turn-of-the-century material, old clothes.
One of the pieces I saw that I found was most interesting was an old water bucket that had come out of a...
Oh, yeah, yeah. What makes that thing interesting, the young man that pulled the water out of the well, they done it for General Eisenhower and General Omar Bradley, which is two of our most famous generals.
What were they doing in Maryville?
That was the 1941 maneuvers. And that young man pulled the water out of the well, poured it into a tub for their bath. 2 bits of a tub.
Well, there's a lot of interesting things in there, but I certainly felt that that was one of the most. You know, when you think of small towns building museums to put things on display, I have to commend your town because that is one of the most beautiful museums I have ever seen anywhere. And I want to ask you another question about it, but as we saute the crab meat into the onions, I'm going to dust a little bit breadcrumbs into it to pick up all of the butter, stir that around really good there, and then we're going to stuff the artichokes, and they're so simple to do because once you mix it up, and of course you can season it if you'd like. I'm going to put a little touch of pepper in it. I'm going to put just a little bitty touch of salt. Stir that up good. Look, I don't want Ruth to say that we did this wrong.
No way.
You know? Now what we'll do is take a little bit of that and I'll stuff right into the center of the artichoke just like that. You get a good look at that. You see how pretty that is with all that crab meat flavor. And then we can do 2 or 3 of them like that, but then I have a big platter of them that's already done. I have them right here, so I want you to take a look at that. We'd have to do Ruth proud. Isn't that a nice looking piece? I know that y'all have a great reenactment over there every year of a Civil War battle. Is that still going on this
Yes,
year?
John. It goes on the last weekend in February every year. It's getting bigger and better, and we this year we had a 3,000 or 4,000 people come to watch it. The Historical Society, we served barbecue, and that was our original fundraiser, our only big one we have during the year.
Was there actually a Civil War battle in that area?
No, it wasn't. It's called the Battle of Bearhead Creek. And the young man that started it there with us, he had to have something to talk about, and he called it Bearhead Creek.
Well, I'm going to be up there at the Battle of Bearhead Creek next time that goes on, and I appreciate you coming to visit with us and telling us about Maryville. Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. And, hey, come back again as we continue to cook up more of these great Taste of Louisiana. John and I is going to eat now.
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
This is PBS.
The companion cookbook to A Taste of Louisiana is available for $22.95. The Evolution of Cajun and Creole Cuisine by Chef John Folse features recipes and food history behind Louisiana's cuisine. This 352-page cookbook contains over 250 recipes, including those from this show. To order, call 1-800-973-7246 or write to the address on your screen.